The sound of my husband's palm connecting with my face echoed through our marble-floored living room like a gunshot. The sting burned across my left cheek as I stumbled backward, my hand instinctively reaching for the ornate side table to steady myself. Through the blur of tears and shock, I saw Chidi standing over me, his chest heaving with rage, while behind him, a woman I'd never seen before adjusted her expensive weave and smirked. "You brought this on yourself, Adunni." Chidi's voice boomed through our Victoria Island home, the same voice that once whispered sweet promises in my ear during our wedding ceremony 15 years ago. "You should have minded your own business. What would you do if you walked in on this? Hit like if you've been betrayed, and comment below where you're watching from." My name is Adunni Okoro, and until 30 minutes ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage. I'm a successful fashion designer with my own boutique in Lekki Phase 1, married to Chidi Okoro, one of Lagos's most prominent real estate developers. We have 3 beautiful children, Kemi, 16, Tund, 14, and little Funmi, just 8 years old. Our marriage had been the envy of our social circle, the power couple who seemed to have it all. But perfection, I learned that evening, can shatter in an instant. I had come home early from a client meeting, excited to surprise Chidi with news about a major contract I just secured with a high-profile politician's wife. The house felt different when I walked in. There was an unfamiliar perfume lingering in the air, expensive but gaudy, nothing like my subtle French fragrances. I followed the scent and the sound of hushed voices to our master bedroom. Through the slightly open door, I saw my husband of 15 years in bed with a woman who couldn't have been older than 25. Her dark skin gleamed with sweat, her elaborate gold jewelry scattered across my Egyptian cotton sheets. They were so engrossed in their domestic betrayal that they didn't notice me standing there, my Hermes bag slipping from my numb fingers to hit the floor with a soft thud. That's when they saw me. The woman, I later learned her name was Blessing, had the audacity to laugh. Not a nervous giggle or an embarrassed shriek, but a full, throaty laugh that seemed to say she'd been waiting for this moment. Chidi jumped up, scrambling for his boxers, his face cycling through shock, guilt, and then, surprisingly, defiance. "Adunni, I can explain," he started, but I was already backing away, my mind reeling. 15 years, I whispered, more to myself than to him. 15 years, Chidi. That's when Blessing spoke up, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oh, honey, it's been much longer than that. 3 years, to be exact." She stretched languidly on my bed, completely naked and utterly shameless. "Didn't he tell you? We're in love." The next few minutes were a blur of shouting, accusations, and revelations that hit me like physical blows. Chidi had been keeping this mistress in a luxury apartment in Banana Island, paid for with money from our joint business accounts. He'd taken her on business trips that I thought were solo ventures. Worse yet, she was pregnant. 4 months pregnant with my husband's child. "She's carrying my son," Chidi said, his chest puffing with pride as he looked at Blessing. "Something you've failed to give me." The cruelty of that statement took my breath away. We had 3 beautiful children together, but Chidi had always wanted a 4th, preferably a son to carry on the family name alongside Tund. When we'd struggled to conceive again after Funmi, I'd blamed myself, endured countless fertility treatments, and felt inadequate as a wife. Now I knew the truth. He'd simply been trying to create the family he wanted elsewhere. That's when I made my mistake. In my hurt and fury, I lunged for Blessing, my hands reaching for her smug face. I wanted to wipe that satisfied smirk away, to make her understand the pain she'd caused. But Chidi moved faster, his large hand connecting with my face in a slap that sent me reeling. "Don't you dare touch her," he roared, his eyes wild with protective fury. For her, not for me. The physical pain of the slap was nothing compared to the emotional devastation. My husband, the man who had vowed to love and protect me, had chosen to physically harm me to defend his pregnant mistress. The man I'd built an empire with, shared a bed with for 15 years, and raised 3 children with, had just shown me exactly where his loyalties lay. As I stood there, my face throbbing and my pride shattered, something cold and calculating settled in my chest where my heart used to be. Chidi and Blessing were whispering to each other, probably planning their next move, assuming I would crumble and accept this new reality like a dutiful Nigerian wife. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I built my fashion business from nothing, turning a small loan into a multi-million-naira empire. I navigated Lagos's cutthroat business world as a woman and emerged victorious. I raised 3 children while managing a career and supporting my husband's dreams. Chidi seemed to have forgotten that behind every successful man stands a woman who could have done it herself. As I watched them embrace on my marital bed, a plan began forming in my mind. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold. But in Lagos's sweltering heat, I was about to serve it ice cold. I picked up my bag and walked out of the bedroom without another word, ignoring their calls behind me. Let them think they'd won. Let Chidi believe his domestic betrayal would go unpunished. Let Blessing think she'd successfully stolen another woman's husband. They would learn soon enough that Adunni Okoro wasn't just any woman. And the revenge I had planned would be unlike anything they could imagine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think happens next? Comment below. 3 days passed in a strange quiet calm that felt like the eye of a storm. I moved through our house like a ghost, preparing breakfast for the children, helping with homework, and maintaining the facade of normalcy while my mind worked furiously behind the scenes. Chidi had moved out temporarily, or so he claimed, staying at his friend's place while we figured things out. Of course, I knew exactly where he was. The Banana Island apartment wasn't hard to find when you knew the right people and had the right connections in Lagos's real estate circles. The children sensed something was wrong, but I deflected their questions with gentle smiles and promises that Daddy was just busy with work. Kemi, my eldest, was too perceptive for her own good, watching me with those intelligent eyes that reminded me so much of my younger self. "Mama, are you and Daddy fighting?" she asked on the 3rd morning, as I braided her hair for school. "Sometimes adults have disagreements, my dear," I replied carefully, my fingers working through her thick, natural hair. "But that doesn't mean we love you any less." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The truth was that I was systematically dismantling everything Chidi thought he owned, piece by piece, with the precision of a surgeon and the patience of a spider. My first move had been to secure our finances. As a successful businesswoman, I'd never been the type to leave financial matters entirely to my husband, despite his subtle attempts over the years to take control. Our business accounts required both signatures for major transactions, but I discovered something interesting when I reviewed our statements. Chidi had been forging my signature for months. 3 years' worth of unauthorized transactions, totaling over 50 million naira, all going to support his infidelity in marriage. The apartment rent, shopping sprees, medical bills for Blessing's pregnancy, and even a car, a brand new Range Rover Sport that cost more than most people's homes. By Thursday afternoon, I was sitting across from barrister Emeka Udoka, one of Lagos's most feared divorce attorneys. His office overlooked the Lagos Lagoon, and through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the chaotic beauty of the city that had shaped me into the woman I'd become. "Mrs. Okoro," he said, reviewing the documents I'd brought, "this is quite comprehensive. Financial fraud, adultery, emotional manipulation. You've built a strong case. But are you certain you want to pursue this course of action? Divorce proceedings can be messy, particularly for someone in your social position." I leaned forward, my voice steady and calm. "Barrister Udoka, my husband slapped me to protect his pregnant mistress. He's been stealing from our joint accounts to fund their relationship for 3 years. He brought this woman into our marital bed while our children were at school. Messy is exactly what he deserves." The lawyer's eyebrows rose slightly. In Lagos's conservative social circles, divorce was still whispered about behind closed doors, particularly when initiated by the wife. But times were changing, and women were finding their voices. "Very well," he said, making notes. "We'll file for divorce on grounds of adultery and financial misconduct. Given the evidence you've provided, we should be able to secure a very favorable settlement. Your business assets are protected by the prenuptial agreement you insisted on, correct?" I smiled, remembering how Chidi had protested that prenup 15 years ago. "A woman who doesn't protect herself has no one to blame but herself," I said, echoing the words my grandmother had told me before my wedding. But divorce proceedings were just the beginning of my revenge story. As I left the lawyer's office, my phone rang. It was my business partner and closest friend, Joka Delik, calling from our boutique. "Adunni, you need to see this," she said, her voice tight with anger. "That man of yours has been spreading rumors. Some of our biggest clients are asking questions about the stability of your personal life affecting your business reliability." My grip tightened on the phone. Chidi was already trying to destroy my reputation, knowing that in Lagos's gossip-driven society, perception was everything. He was attempting to paint me as an unstable wife who couldn't keep her home together, hoping to damage my business before I could strike back. He'd made a critical error in judgment. That evening, I sat in my home office, surrounded by 15 years' worth of business documents, family photos, and memories that now felt like lies. My laptop screen glowed with emails, social media profiles, and bank statements that painted a very different picture of my marriage than the one everyone saw. I'd always been the organized one, the one who kept meticulous records. Every business dinner, every charity event, every family vacation was documented with photos, receipts, and detailed notes. What I was looking at now was a treasure trove of evidence that would not only secure my divorce but destroy Chidi's reputation in Lagos's tight-knit business community. The photos were particularly damning. Images of Chidi at business events with various women over the past 3 years, all taken by professional photographers for social magazines. I'd thought these were clients or business associates, but now, looking closer, I could see the intimate body language, the secretive smiles, the way his hand lingered on their waists. Blessing wasn't his first affair. She was just the one careless enough to get pregnant. As I compiled my evidence, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Stop digging or you'll regret it. Some secrets are better left buried." The threat made my blood run cold, but it also confirmed something I'd suspected. Chidi was panicking. He knew I was stronger than he'd expected, and his attempt to intimidate me was just another sign of his desperation. I took a screenshot of the message and added it to my growing file. Then I did something that would have terrified the old Adunni. I called my contact at one of Lagos's most influential gossip blogs. "Ada," I said when the blogger answered, "it's Adunni Okoro. I have a story for you, and it's going to be the scandal of the year." The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls from Chidi and a text that made my heart race with vindicated satisfaction. "What have you done, Adunni? You've ruined everything." But as I reached for my phone to see what story had been published, I heard something that made my blood freeze. The sound of a car pulling into our compound at 6 a.m., followed by heavy footsteps on our front stairs. Through my bedroom window, I saw Chidi getting out of his car, his face twisted with rage, while Blessing sat in the passenger seat, her pregnant belly visible even from this distance. But they weren't alone. 3 large men in dark clothing followed them toward my front door. The pounding started before I could react, violent and demanding. "Adunni, open this door now." Chidi's voice carried a threat I'd never heard before. My children were still sleeping. The house staff wouldn't arrive for another hour. And I was alone with 3 children to protect while my estranged husband stood outside my door with what looked like hired muscle. The revenge I'd planned had clearly worked better than I'd expected. But now I was about to discover just how far Chidi was willing to go to stop me. Don't miss what happens next. Hit the notification bell to stay updated with this explosive story. The pounding on my front door grew more violent, each bang echoing through our spacious home like thunderclaps. I grabbed my silk robe and crept toward the window, my heart hammering against my ribcage as I peered through the blinds. Chidi stood on our front step, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, his face contorted with a rage I'd never seen before. The three men behind him looked like hired muscle, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of cold eyes that suggested they were used to intimidating people. "Mama, what's that noise?" Funmi's small voice from behind me nearly made me jump out of my skin. My youngest daughter stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes, her favorite teddy bear clutched against her pink pajamas. "Nothing, baby," I said, forcing my voice to remain calm while my mind raced. "Go back to bed. Mama will handle everything." But Funmi's presence reminded me of what was at stake. Whatever Chidi was planning, I couldn't let my children witness it. I quickly ushered her back to her room, then moved swiftly through the house, checking that Kemi and Tund were still asleep. The pounding had stopped, but the silence that followed was somehow more terrifying. My phone buzzed with a call from Chidi. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Open the door, Adunni." His voice was low and menacing. "We need to talk." Talk. I kept my voice equally low, not wanting to wake the children. "You brought thugs to my home at 6 in the morning. What exactly do you want to talk about?" "You know what you did," he hissed. "That blog post. You've humiliated me, destroyed my reputation. Do you have any idea what this could do to my business? To our children's future?" I had to suppress a bitter laugh. The blog post had been even more devastating than I'd hoped. Ada had published everything: the financial fraud, the multiple affairs, even photos of Chidi and Blessing at expensive restaurants and hotels around Lagos. The headline read, "Lagos Real Estate Mogul's Secret Life. Millionaire Businessman Exposed for Years of Cheating and Financial Deception." Within hours, the post had been shared thousands of times across social media. Lagos's elite social circles thrived on scandal, and Chidi's fall from grace was providing entertainment for everyone except his business partners and clients. "You should have thought about our children's future before you slapped their mother to protect your pregnant mistress," I replied coldly. "You should have considered their welfare before you stole 50 million naira from our joint accounts to fund your affairs." "Those accounts are mine," he exploded. "I earned that money. With forged signatures on my accounts. The bank security footage is quite clear, Chidi. Your handwriting expert should have done better work." There was silence on the other end, and I realized he hadn't known about the security footage. In his arrogance, he'd assumed I was just an emotional wife lashing out, not a strategic businesswoman who'd spent 3 days gathering evidence. "Open this door, Adunni," he said again, his voice now carrying a different kind of threat. "Or I'll open it myself." I hung up and immediately dialed 999, Nigeria's emergency number. But before I could complete the call, I heard the sound of shattering glass from the back of the house. They weren't coming through the front door. They were breaking in through the kitchen. My children. I had to protect my children. I ran upstairs, my bare feet silent on the marble stairs, and quickly woke Kemi. "Baby, I need you to take Tund and Funmi to the panic room. Now." Kemi's eyes widened with fear, but she didn't ask questions. 2 years ago, after a spate of kidnappings targeting wealthy families in Lagos, Chidi had insisted on installing a safe room behind the master bedroom closet. Ironically, to protect us from exactly this kind of situation. As my eldest daughter shepherded her siblings towards safety, I heard heavy footsteps downstairs. They were inside. I grabbed my phone and the emergency bag I kept in our bedroom. Cash, passports, important documents, and my laptop with all the evidence I'd compiled. Then I made a decision that surprised even me. Instead of hiding, I walked down the stairs to confront them. Chidi stood in our living room, surveying the space like he was seeing it for the first time. Blessing sat on our leather sofa, her hand protectively cradling her pregnant belly, while the three men spread out through the room like they were casing it. "Looking for something?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Chidi spun around, his face showing surprise that I wasn't cowering upstairs. "Where are my children?" "Safe," I replied. "Which is more than I can say about their mother right now." One of the men stepped forward, but Chidi held up a hand to stop him. "Adunni, you're going to retract that story. You're going to call that blogger and tell her it was all lies, that you were just an angry wife making things up." "And if I don't?" Blessing spoke up for the first time, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Then maybe people will learn some interesting things about your business practices, your family background, your real reasons for marrying Chidi in the first place." I stared at her, this young woman who thought she understood power dynamics, who believed she could intimidate someone with 15 years of experience navigating Lagos's treacherous social waters. "What exactly do you think you know about me?" I asked. "I know your father isn't really dead," she said with a smug smile. "I know he's serving time in Kirikiri prison for embezzlement. I know your entire respectable family background is a lie you created to trap a wealthy husband." The words hit me like physical blows, but I kept my expression neutral. Blessing had done her homework, I'd give her that. My father's imprisonment was the secret I'd guarded most carefully, the shame that had driven me to work twice as hard, to build my own success, to prove I was more than my family's mistakes. But if she thought this revelation would destroy me, she'd miscalculated badly. "You're right," I said simply. "My father is in prison. My family is poor. I married Chidi partially for financial security." I paused, watching confusion flicker across their faces. "But that doesn't change the fact that everything in that blog post about your husband is absolutely true. And it doesn't change the evidence I have of his financial crimes." Chidi's face went pale. "What evidence?" I smiled, pulling out my phone. "The evidence I already sent to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission this morning. Bank statements, forged documents, witness testimony from your banker who's been cooperative in exchange for immunity. They should be issuing a warrant for your arrest within the hour." The room went dead silent. Even the men Chidi had brought looked uncertain now, probably realizing they'd been hired to intimidate someone who was 3 steps ahead of everyone in the room. "You're bluffing," Blessing said, but her voice had lost its confident edge. "Am I?" I asked. "Check your phones. I believe the morning news should be quite interesting today." As if on cue, all of their phones began buzzing simultaneously. The look of horror that crossed Chidi's face as he read whatever message he'd received told me everything I needed to know. But my moment of triumph was short-lived. One of the men stepped forward, his hand moving to his jacket, and I realized that cornered animals are the most dangerous kind. "Nobody move," a new voice commanded from the doorway. "Lagos State Police. This house is surrounded." I had never been so happy to see law enforcement in my life. But as the police filed into my living room, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Chidi was smiling again, and Blessing was whispering something to one of the officers. My revenge was working perfectly, but I was about to discover that in Lagos, money and connections could buy you out of almost anything. Even a house full of evidence and witnesses. Comment your thoughts on this betrayal below, and don't forget to share this story with someone who loves dramatic twists. The next few hours passed in a blur of accusations, evidence presentation, and the kind of bureaucratic chaos that only Nigerian law enforcement could orchestrate. I sat in the Lagos State Police headquarters on Victoria Island, watching through a window as Chidi and Blessing whispered urgently with their lawyer, a man I recognized as one of Lagos's most expensive and morally flexible attorneys. Detective Inspector Folake Adeyemi, the officer assigned to our case, reviewed my evidence with the kind of meticulous attention that gave me hope. She was a woman in her 40s, with intelligent eyes and the bearing of someone who'd fought her way up through Nigeria's male-dominated police force. "Mrs. Okoro," she said, looking up from the bank statements I'd provided. This is substantial evidence of financial fraud. The forged signatures alone are enough for criminal charges. But I have to ask, why didn't you report this earlier? The question I'd been dreading, because the answer revealed just how thoroughly I'd been manipulated over the years. Inspector, I trusted my husband. When I saw discrepancies in our accounts, he always had explanations. Business expenses, investment opportunities, family emergencies. It wasn't until I caught him with his mistress that I realized the pattern. She nodded, understanding. Domestic betrayal often involves financial manipulation. Women are often the last to know because they're conditioned to trust their partners with money matters. She paused, then leaned forward. But there's something else you should know. Your husband's lawyer is claiming you fabricated this evidence out of revenge. He's suggesting you created false documents to frame him after discovering his affair. My heart sank. Of course Chidi would try this approach. Paint me as the scorned wife who'd gone too far. In Nigeria's legal system, a woman's word often carried less weight than a man's, especially when money and reputation were involved. Inspector, I have the original bank surveillance footage showing him forging my signatures. I have witnesses who saw him with various women over the past 3 years. I have medical records showing I required treatment for stress and anxiety, which my doctor attributed to marital problems I was trying to hide. All of which his lawyer will claim could be fabricated or misinterpreted, she replied. Mrs. Okoro, I believe you. The evidence is compelling, and I've seen too many cases like this. But belief and proof in court are different things. Before I could respond, there was a commotion in the corridor outside. Through the glass partition, I saw Chidi being led past our room in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled, his usual confident demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. Our eyes met for a moment, and the hatred I saw there made me shiver. But it was what happened next that truly shocked me. As they led him past, Blessing appeared in the corridor, no longer pregnant. I blinked hard, certain I was seeing things. Just hours ago, she'd been cradling a 4-month pregnant belly. Now, her stomach was flat, her body showing no signs of pregnancy at all. Inspector, I said urgently. That woman, Blessing, she was pregnant this morning. Look at her now. Inspector Adeyemi followed my gaze and frowned. She called to one of the officers in the corridor, speaking rapidly in Yoruba. Within minutes, Blessing was being escorted into another interview room, her earlier smugness replaced by visible nervousness. Interesting development, the inspector murmured. Let's see what story she tells us now. 20 minutes later, Inspector Adeyemi returned with information that left me speechless. The pregnancy was fake, Mrs. Okoro. A sophisticated prosthetic device used to simulate pregnancy. When we searched her belongings, we found the entire apparatus, along with fake ultrasound images and forged medical reports. I stared at her, my mind struggling to process this revelation. But why? What was the point? According to her statement, your husband promised to leave you and marry her if she became pregnant with his child. When she couldn't conceive naturally, she decided to fake it until she could find a way to actually get pregnant or convince him to leave you anyway. The emotional manipulation was staggering. Not only had Chidi been cheating on me for years, but his pregnant mistress, the woman he'd slapped me to protect, had been lying to him as well. It would have been laughable if it weren't so devastating. There's more, Inspector Adeyemi continued. Miss Blessing has provided some interesting information about your husband's business practices. It seems he's been running multiple scams, using different women to help him defraud investors and launder money. She was just the latest in a long line of accomplices. I felt sick. My husband wasn't just an unfaithful spouse. He was a career criminal who'd been using our marriage and family as a cover for years of illegal activities. Everything I'd believed about our life together was built on lies. But then the inspector delivered the news that changed everything. Mrs. Okoro, based on Blessing's testimony and the evidence you've provided, we're expanding our investigation. Your husband is now facing charges of fraud, money laundering, forgery, and criminal conspiracy. The EFCC has frozen all accounts associated with his business pending investigation. I should have felt vindicated, but instead, I felt hollow. My revenge was succeeding beyond my wildest dreams, but the cost was becoming clear. Our children would grow up knowing their father was a criminal. Our family name would be associated with scandal. And despite everything, I had loved this man for 15 years. As if reading my thoughts, Inspector Adeyemi said gently, "Mrs. Okoro, I know this is overwhelming. But you should know, we found evidence that your husband was planning to divorce you anyway, after liquidating your joint assets. He was going to leave you with nothing while he started fresh with his mistress. Your discovery of his affair just accelerated his timeline." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't just caught Chidi cheating. I'd prevented him from financially destroying me and our children. My revenge hadn't been revenge at all. It had been survival. But as I sat there processing this information, my phone rang. It was Kemi, my eldest daughter, and her voice was panicked. "Mama, something's wrong. There are men at the house again, but these ones have cameras. They're asking questions about Daddy, and they want to talk to us children. What should we do?" The media had found our story, and now my children were being hunted by reporters hungry for more details about Lagos's latest scandal. The revenge I'd set in motion was about to consume not just Chidi, but our entire family. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. Like, if you're shocked by this twist, what would you do to protect your children in this situation? The scene outside our family home looked like something from a movie. News vans lined our usually quiet Victoria Island street, satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metallic flowers. Reporters with cameras and microphones clustered around our gate, some even climbing our fence to get better shots of the house where Lagos's biggest financial scandal of the year had unfolded. I sat in Inspector Adeyemi's police car, watching the chaos from a distance, my heart breaking for my children who were trapped inside. Through the car window, I could see Kemi peeking through the upstairs curtains, probably trying to shield her younger siblings from the circus below. "This is getting out of hand," I murmured to the inspector. "My children don't deserve this public disgrace." "Mrs. Okoro, I'm afraid this is just the beginning," she replied grimly. "When the EFCC releases their full report on your husband's activities, this story will get much bigger. They've uncovered a network of fraudulent businesses, fake investments, and money laundering operations that goes back almost a decade. Your husband wasn't just stealing from you. He was stealing from dozens of investors across Lagos." The weight of this revelation settled over me like a heavy blanket. All those years when Chidi claimed to be working late, attending business meetings, traveling for deals, he'd been systematically defrauding people, using our family's reputation and our home as collateral for his schemes. How many people did he hurt? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. So far, we've identified 47 victims who lost a combined total of over 2 billion naira to various schemes he orchestrated. Pension funds, small business owners, even a children's charity that invested their fundraising money with him. 2 billion naira. The number was so large I couldn't even process it. Chidi hadn't just been having an affair. He'd been running a criminal empire, and I'd been unknowingly providing him with the perfect cover of respectability. My phone rang again. This time it was Joke, my business partner, and her voice was strained with worry. "Adunni, you need to see the news. They're saying your boutique might be connected to Chidi's money laundering. Some of our biggest clients are being questioned by the EFCC. Our bank has frozen our business accounts pending investigation." I closed my eyes, feeling the walls closing in around me. My business, the one thing I'd built independently, the source of my pride and financial security, was being dragged down with Chidi's criminality. "Joke, You know I had nothing to do with his illegal activities, I said desperately. I know that, but the media doesn't care about facts. They're running with the story that you were either complicit or incredibly naive. Either way, it's destroying our reputation. 3 of our biggest clients have already cancelled their contracts. After hanging up, I stared at the chaos outside our home and realized that my revenge had backfired spectacularly. I'd wanted to expose Chidi's infidelity and make him pay for his betrayal, but I'd unleashed something much larger and more destructive. His crimes were so extensive that everyone associated with him, including me and our children, was being painted with the same brush. Inspector Adeyemi received a call on her radio, then turned to me with a grim expression. Mrs. Okoro, I'm afraid I have more bad news. Your husband has been granted bail. What? I turned to stare at her in disbelief. How is that possible? You said the evidence against him was overwhelming. His lawyer argued that he's not a flight risk because of his family ties to Lagos, and he posted bail of 50 million naira. He'll be out within the hour, pending trial. 50 million naira, probably paid with money he'd stolen from his victims. The injustice of it made me want to scream. Inspector, he threatened me yesterday morning. He brought hired men to my home and broke in. What's to stop him from doing it again? We can arrange for increased patrols around your home, but legally, there's not much more we can do unless he violates his bail conditions. As if conjured by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text from Chidi. You've destroyed everything, Adunni. Our family, our reputation, our children's future. I hope you're satisfied with your revenge. But this isn't over. The threat was clear, even if it wasn't explicit enough for legal action. I was trapped between media attention that painted me as either a criminal accomplice or a naive fool, financial ruin as my business collapsed, and a vengeful ex-husband who blamed me for exposing his crimes. But it was what happened next that truly terrified me. As Inspector Adeyemi and I watched, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up across the street from our house. It parked just out of sight of the media circus, but clearly visible to anyone watching from our home. The windows stayed closed, the engine running, but no one got out. That's not a reporter, Inspector Adeyemi observed, her hand moving instinctively to her service weapon. My blood ran cold as I realized what we were looking at. In Lagos, when someone owes money to the wrong people, when someone's exposure threatens larger criminal networks, black SUVs with tinted windows often appeared as a warning. Inspector, I said slowly, what if Chidi wasn't working alone? What if his money laundering operation was connected to bigger criminals? People who don't want their business exposed in court. She was already reaching for her radio when the SUV's door opened and a man in expensive traditional attire stepped out. He was middle-aged, well-dressed, but there was something about his bearing that suggested violence lurked beneath his polished exterior. He looked directly at our police car, smiled coldly, and made a gesture across his throat. Then he got back in the SUV and drove away. Mrs. Okoro, Inspector Adeyemi said quietly, I think we need to get you and your children into protective custody immediately. This case just became much more dangerous than financial fraud. But as she reached for her radio to call for backup, both of our phones exploded with notifications simultaneously. The EFCC had just released a press statement that would change everything. Lagos businessman's wife revealed AS key witness iron billion-naira money laundering network. I stared at the headline in horror. They weren't calling me a victim anymore. They were calling me a witness, which implied I had information that could bring down an entire criminal organization. Information that could get me killed. Don't miss the next explosive chapter. Subscribe now to see how Adunni fights for her family's survival. The safe house in Ikeja felt like a prison, despite the police protection. For 3 days, my children and I had been confined to this nondescript 2-bedroom apartment, watching our lives unravel on every news channel in Lagos. The EFCC's revelation that I was a key witness had transformed me from vengeful wife to potential target overnight. Kemi sat by the window, her 16-year-old face etched with worry that no child should carry. "Mama, when can we go home? When will this be over?" I wished I had answers for her. The truth was, our home was no longer safe, and I was beginning to understand that my revenge had exposed something far more sinister than a cheating husband. Chidi had been a small player in a massive criminal network, and my evidence had threatened to bring down people with the power and resources to make problems disappear permanently. Inspector Adeyemi arrived that afternoon with updates that made my blood run cold. "Mrs. Okoro, we've made some disturbing discoveries," she said, settling into the apartment's small living area while my children played quietly in the bedroom. "Your husband's business partners include some of Lagos's most dangerous individuals. Drug money, kidnapping proceeds, political corruption funds. They were washing everything through his real estate ventures." "And they think I know about all of this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "They think you have access to records that could expose the entire network. Bank statements, client lists, property records. Information that could send dozens of powerful people to prison for life." The irony was crushing. I'd spent weeks gathering evidence to expose Chidi's infidelity, never realizing I was also documenting one of Lagos's largest money laundering operations. My meticulous record-keeping, the trait that had made me successful in business, had accidentally made me one of the most dangerous witnesses in Nigeria. "Inspector, I need to know, how bad is this? Are my children in real danger?" Her hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "Mrs. Okoro, yesterday morning, 3 people connected to this case were found dead. A banker who was cooperating with our investigation, a former business partner of your husband's who agreed to testify, and—" She paused, clearly struggling with the words. "And Blessing, your husband's mistress." The room seemed to tilt around me. "Blessing is dead. Murdered in her apartment sometime Tuesday night. Professional job, no signs of struggle, no witnesses. The message is clear. People who cooperate with authorities or who know too much don't survive." I thought of the young woman who had smugly sat on my sofa just days ago, confident in her power to destroy my marriage. Despite everything she'd done, she didn't deserve to die for it. And if they could kill her so easily, my children and I were living on borrowed time. "What about Chidi?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Still alive, but he's been moved to protective custody as well. Apparently, his former partners don't trust him to stay quiet under pressure. He's agreed to cooperate fully with the EFCC in exchange for witness protection." The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had betrayed our marriage, slapped me for his mistress, and stolen millions from our accounts was now in the same situation as me, hiding from criminals he'd helped create. My phone rang, and Inspector Adeyemi tensed until she saw it was Joke calling. I answered on speaker, hoping for some normalcy in this nightmare. "Adunni, I have good news and bad news." Joke's voice filled the small room. "The good news is that 3 major clients have reached out privately to say they believe you're innocent and want to support you when this is over. The bad news is that someone broke into our boutique last night." "What did they take?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "Nothing. They didn't take anything. They destroyed everything. Fabric, designs, client files, computers. It looks like they were searching for something specific and got frustrated when they couldn't find it." Inspector Adeyemi and I exchanged glances. The criminals weren't just trying to silence me. They were systematically destroying any evidence I might have hidden, any records that could further expose their operations. "Joke," I said carefully, "please be very careful. Stay somewhere safe, vary your routines. And if anyone asks questions about me or my business, refer them to the police." After I hung up, the weight of responsibility settled over me like a heavy blanket. My quest for revenge had endangered not just my family, but everyone connected to me. My business partner, my employees, even my domestic staff were potential targets because of their association with me. That evening, as I watched my children try to maintain normalcy by doing homework and playing games, I made a decision that terrified me. I called Inspector Adeyemi aside and said the words that would change everything. I want to testify. I want to cooperate fully with the investigation and help bring down this entire network. She stared at me in shock. Mrs. Okoro, you understand what that means? Full cooperation would require you to provide everything. Every document, every piece of evidence, every detail about your husband's activities over the past 15 years. It would make you the star witness in the biggest criminal trial in Lagos's recent history. I understand. And you understand that it would also make you the primary target for elimination? These people don't just kill witnesses, Mrs. Okoro. They make examples of them. I looked at my children, huddled together on the small sofa, their innocence shattered by circumstances beyond their control. They deserved better than a life spent hiding from their father's crimes. They deserved justice, and they deserved a mother brave enough to fight for it. Inspector, my husband destroyed our family with his betrayal and his crimes. His criminal partners have threatened my children and murdered innocent people. Running and hiding won't make us safe. It will just make us prisoners for the rest of our lives. She nodded slowly, respect evident in her expression. Mrs. Okoro, if you testify, we can provide witness protection, new identities, relocation assistance. But understand, once you cross this line, there's no going back. Your old life, your business, your social circle, all of that ends. My old life ended the moment I walked in on my husband with his mistress, I replied. At least this way, his victims get justice, and my children get to grow up knowing their mother fought back. But as I spoke those brave words, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your children are beautiful. Especially little Funmi with her pink school bag. It would be a shame if something happened to them because their mother made poor choices. Inspector Adeyemi was already moving, shouting orders into her radio, calling for immediate security sweeps of all nearby schools. But the message was clear. They knew where my children went to school, what they looked like, what they carried. My revenge had escalated into a war, and the enemy had just declared my babies to be legitimate targets. The phone in my hand began ringing with another unknown number, and somehow, I knew this call would determine whether my children lived or died. What would you do to protect your family? Comment below and share this story. Justice needs witnesses. I stared at the ringing phone for 3 agonizing seconds before Inspector Adeyemi motioned for me to answer while she activated the call tracing equipment. My hand trembled as I swiped to accept the call, putting it on speaker so she could hear everything. Mrs. Adunni Okoro, a voice said, cultured and calm, speaking English with the slight accent that marked Lagos's educated elite. I believe you received our message about your children. Who are you? I demanded, surprised by how steady my voice sounded despite the terror coursing through my veins. Someone who would prefer to resolve this situation diplomatically rather than through more dramatic measures. Your husband has created quite a mess, hasn't he? And now you're threatening to make it even messier. Inspector Adeyemi was frantically signaling her team through hand gestures, but I forced myself to focus on the conversation that could determine my children's fate. What do you want? I asked. Simple. You withdraw your cooperation with the authorities. You recount your statements about your husband's activities. You claim you were an emotionally disturbed wife who fabricated evidence out of spite. In return, your children remain safe, and you're allowed to rebuild your life quietly. The offer was tempting in its simplicity. I could end this nightmare, protect my babies, and try to salvage some kind of normal existence. But I thought about Blessing, murdered for knowing too much. About the 47 victims who had lost their life savings to Chidi's schemes. About all the other families destroyed by this criminal network. And if I refuse? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The man's laugh was soft and chilling. Mrs. Okoro, you're an intelligent woman. You understand the stakes. Your children's safety depends entirely on your cooperation. Surely their lives are worth more than your desire for revenge against an unfaithful husband. He was trying to frame this as petty marital revenge, minimizing the scope of the crimes I'd uncovered. But I'd seen too much, learned too much about the network's reach and brutality. I need time to consider, I said. Of course. 24 hours should be sufficient. We'll be in touch tomorrow evening for your decision. The line went dead, leaving Inspector Adeyemi and me staring at each other in the sudden silence. Did you get a trace? I asked. The call was routed through multiple international servers. Impossible to trace quickly. But Mrs. Okoro, we need to discuss your options realistically. This threat against your children is credible. These people have demonstrated they're willing to kill witnesses. I walked to the window, looking out at the busy Lagos street below. Somewhere out there, people were going about their normal lives, unaware that their city harbored criminal networks powerful enough to threaten police witnesses with impunity. Inspector, if I cooperate with them, how long before they decide I'm still too dangerous to keep alive? How long before they eliminate the only witness who can connect all the pieces of their operation? She was quiet for a long moment. Probably not long, she admitted. Witnesses who recant often meet with accidents shortly afterward. The criminals can't risk them changing their minds again. So my choice is between watching my children live in fear forever or watching them die to protect a criminal empire. There might be a third option, she said slowly, but it would require incredible courage and perfect execution. I turned to face her. Tell me. We set a trap. We make them believe you're going to cooperate, draw them into the open for a meeting, and capture the leadership of this network. But Mrs. Okoro, if it goes wrong, the consequences for you and your children would be fatal, I finished. Inspector, these people murdered a pregnant young woman just for knowing about fake pregnancy scam. They're not going to hesitate to kill a mother of 3 who can expose their billion-naira operation. Which is why the trap has to work perfectly. Before I could respond, my phone rang again. This time it was a number I recognized. My mother, calling from our family compound in Ogun State. Mama, I answered, my heart immediately racing with new fear. Adunni, some men came to the house today. Her voice was shaky, older than I'd ever heard it sound. They were asking questions about you, about your children, about when you might visit. They were very polite, very well dressed. But what, Mama? But they knew things, Adunni. They knew about your father's situation, about our financial struggles before you married Chidi. They knew things only family would know. And when they left, they said to tell you that family is everything, and family should be protected at all costs. I closed my eyes, feeling the walls closing in from all directions. They weren't just threatening my children. They were threatening my entire extended family, using my mother's safety to reinforce their message. Mama, I need you to pack a bag and go stay with Uncle Taiwo in Ibadan. Don't tell anyone where you're going, and don't come back until I call you. Adunni, what kind of trouble are you in? This is about Chidi's business problems, isn't it? Just please, Mama. Go to Uncle Taiwo's today. I'll explain everything later. After I hung up, Inspector Adeyemi looked at me with something that might have been admiration mixed with pity. Mrs. Okoro, they're applying pressure from every possible angle. Your children, your mother, your business, your reputation. They're systematically destroying your life to force compliance. Then we spring the trap, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. But Inspector, I have one condition. My children cannot be anywhere near Lagos when this happens. I need them completely safe, no matter what happens to me. She nodded. We can arrange for them to be taken to a secure location outside Nigeria if necessary. But are you absolutely certain about this? Once we start, there's no backing down. I thought about 15 years of marriage to a man who had used me as cover for criminal activities. About Blessing, barely 25 years old, murdered for playing a role in someone else's game. About my children, who deserve to grow up free from the shadow of their father's crimes. I'm certain, I said. But I want to record a video message for my children, in case you don't survive to explain why their mother chose justice over safety, she finished softly. As I nodded, my phone buzzed with yet another message from an unknown number. This time it wasn't a threat. It was a photo. A photo of Kemi walking out of her school, taken that afternoon despite all our security precautions. The message was clear. They could reach my children anytime, anywhere, no matter how much protection I thought I had arranged. The trap wasn't just our plan anymore. It was our only hope for survival. Hit like if you're on the edge of your seat. What do you think Adunni should do? The plan was set in motion at dawn. Inspector Adeyemi had worked through the night with EFCC officials and international law enforcement to coordinate what they called Operation Clean Sweep, an ambitious attempt to capture the entire leadership of the money laundering network in one coordinated strike. I stood in the bathroom mirror of our safe house, applying makeup to cover the stress lines that had appeared over the past week. Today, I would play the role of a broken woman, ready to sacrifice justice for her children's safety. The performance of my life, with my family's survival hanging in the balance. My children had been moved during the night to what Inspector Adeyemi described as a secure international location. I'd kissed them goodbye while they slept, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. Kemi had stirred as I touched her forehead, her eyes opening briefly. "Mama," she'd murmured, "are we going to be okay?" "Yes, baby," I'd whispered back. "Mama's going to make sure we're all okay." Now, 12 hours later, I was preparing to walk into a trap that could either free us or get us all killed. The meeting was set for 2 p.m. at the Oriental Hotel on Victoria Island, a public location that suggested the criminals were confident in their power and influence. They'd chosen the hotel's executive lounge, a space where Lagos's elite conducted business deals worth billions of naira every day. Inspector Adeyemi checked my hidden recording device one final time. "Remember, Mrs. Okoro, we need them to explicitly discuss their criminal activities, their threats against you, and their role in the murders. General conversations won't be enough for prosecution." "I understand," I replied, though my hands were shaking as I adjusted my traditional wrapper and matching blouse. I'd chosen traditional Nigerian attire deliberately. I wanted to look like a respectful wife and mother, not a threat to anyone. Our teams will be positioned throughout the hotel, but we can't move until we have clear evidence of criminal activity on tape. No matter what they say to intimidate you, no matter what threats they make, you have to keep them talking until we have enough for arrests. The car ride to Victoria Island felt like a funeral procession. Lagos traffic had never seemed so ominous, every vehicle potentially carrying enemies, every street corner a possible ambush point. I found myself memorizing landmarks, wondering if this would be the last time I saw my city. The Oriental Hotel's lobby was busy with the usual mix of business travelers, tourists, and Lagos socialites. I made my way to the executive lounge, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. He was waiting for me at a corner table, just as promised. Middle-aged, impeccably dressed in traditional Yoruba agbada, with the kind of commanding presence that suggested significant wealth and power. 2 younger men in expensive suits sat at nearby tables, their attention focused on the entrance and exits. "Mrs. Okoro," he stood as I approached, offering his hand with the courtesy of a gentleman. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." You have my children threatened, I said, refusing his handshake. Let's skip the pleasantries. He smiled, unbothered by my hostility. Direct. I appreciate that. Very well. You understand why we're here. You want me to lie to protect your criminal enterprise. I want you to be realistic about your situation, Mrs. Okoro. Your husband was a minor partner in a very large, very successful business operation. His indiscretions have created complications that need to be managed. I leaned forward, making sure my hidden recording device would pick up every word. What kind of business operation launders 2 billion naira through fake real estate deals? His eyes sharpened, but his smile remained pleasant. The kind that provides employment for thousands of people, Mrs. Okoro. Import businesses, construction companies, transportation services, legitimate enterprises that happen to benefit from certain financial flexibilities. You mean money laundering for drug cartels and kidnappers? I mean business adaptation in Nigeria's challenging economic environment. He paused to sip his tea, completely calm. But terminology is less important than practical considerations. Your cooperation ensures your children's safety. Your continued interference ensures their suffering. The threat was clear, but I needed more explicit admissions. What happened to Blessing? To the banker who was cooperating with police? Tragic accidents, he said, his tone suggesting they were anything but accidental. Nigeria can be dangerous for people who don't understand their place in the larger order of things. And if I cooperate, if I recount my testimony, then you and your children relocate quietly to somewhere peaceful. London, perhaps, or Toronto. Your business interests are compensated generously for their inconvenience. You live comfortably, anonymously, and safely. It sounded almost reasonable, if you ignored the underlying threat of murder. I could see how other witnesses had been convinced to cooperate, how this network had operated with impunity for years. How do I know you'll keep your word? I asked. Mrs. Okoro, we're businesspeople, not monsters. Dead witnesses create investigations. Disappeared witnesses create questions. Satisfied witnesses who've been well compensated for their discretion create stability. He was lying, and we both knew it. But I needed him to be more explicit about the murders, more detailed about the criminal operations. What about my husband? What happens to Chidi? Your husband made mistakes. Serious mistakes. He allowed personal relationships to compromise operational security. But he's agreed to be more disciplined in his future business practices. Future practices? He's supposed to be going to prison. The man's laugh was genuinely amused. Mrs. Okoro, your husband will never see the inside of a prison cell. His bail was arranged by people with significant influence in Nigeria's judicial system. His cooperation with authorities will suddenly become unreliable. Key evidence will be ruled inadmissible. Witnesses will recount or become unavailable. My blood ran cold as I realized the full scope of their corruption. They weren't just criminals. They owned parts of the system designed to prosecute criminals. And the 47 people he defrauded? The pension funds, the charity money. Business losses. Unfortunate but not uncommon in Nigeria's volatile investment climate. He leaned forward, his voice becoming more serious. Mrs. Okoro, you seem to believe you're fighting for justice. But justice is a luxury that only people with power can afford. Your husband has power. We have power. You have children who need their mother alive. It was the most explicit threat yet, and I could see him growing impatient with my questions. Time was running out for Inspector Adeyemi's team to gather enough evidence. But then he said something that changed everything. Of course, your cooperation must be complete. We'll need you to provide us with any additional evidence you might have gathered, any documents or recordings that weren't turned over to authorities. Our technical team will also need to examine your devices to ensure no copies exist. What if I've already shared everything with the police? Then you'll help us identify which officers have access to sensitive materials. Your Inspector Adeyemi, for instance, has been remarkably thorough in her investigation, perhaps too thorough for her own good. The implication was clear. They were planning to murder Inspector Adeyemi, and they wanted my help to do it. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. I need time to think about this. Mrs. Okoro, his voice carried a warning. You have until tonight to provide your answer. And remember, we know where your children are. All of them. The last sentence hit me like a physical blow. They knew about the secure location. They knew where my babies had been taken for safety. As I walked away from the table, my legs barely supporting me, I realized that our trap had just become a death sentence for everyone I loved. But I also realized something else. His threats had been recorded, his admissions captured, his corruption of the justice system documented. The question now was whether Inspector Adeyemi could act fast enough to save us all before the network silenced us permanently. Don't stop now. The final confrontation is coming. Subscribe and hit the bell for the explosive conclusion. The secure phone in my hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds as Inspector Adeyemi's voice crackled through with news that made my world collapse. Mrs. Okoro, we have a problem. The location where your children were taken, it's been compromised. We're moving them again, but... But what? I whispered, though I already knew the answer from her hesitation. But we lost contact with the transport team 20 minutes ago. We're dispatching backup units. But Mrs. Okoro, you need to prepare for the possibility that they've been taken. The hotel room around me seemed to spin as the full horror of the situation hit me. My trap hadn't just failed. It had given these criminals everything they needed to complete their revenge. They had my children, they had evidence of my cooperation with police, and they had demonstrated that their reach extended far beyond Lagos. Inspector, the meeting was recorded, right? You got everything. Yes, we have comprehensive evidence of criminal conspiracy, corruption, and threats. It's enough to bring down the entire network, but only if we can present it in court. And only if key witnesses survive to testify. I looked out the hotel window at Lagos sprawling below me, this city that had been my home for over 2 decades, now transformed into enemy territory where my children were being hunted by murderers. What are my options? I asked, though I suspected there were none. Officially, we continue with protective custody, hope our teams locate your children, and prepare for trial. Unofficially. She paused. Mrs. Okoro, these people have resources we can't match. They've demonstrated they can reach anyone, anywhere. Your children's only hope might be if you give them what they want. The thought of surrendering, of watching criminals escape justice while children suffered for their parents' crimes, made me physically ill. But the alternative was potentially watching my own children die for my principles. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Check your email. With trembling fingers, I opened my email to find a video attachment. The preview image showed Kemi, Tund, and little Funmi sitting in what looked like an elegant living room, all 3 of them visibly frightened but apparently unharmed. I clicked play, and a familiar voice spoke from off-camera, the same cultured tone from our hotel meeting. Mrs. Okoro, as you can see, your children are safe and comfortable. They're staying in a lovely home with very kind people who are taking excellent care of them. Whether they remain safe depends entirely on your decision tonight. The camera moved closer to my babies' faces. Kemi was holding Funmi protectively while Tun sat rigidly, trying to be brave. They looked so young, so vulnerable, so completely dependent on their mother's choices. Mama, if you can see this, Kemi spoke directly to the camera, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. We're okay. But these people say they need you to help them with something important. Please, Mama, just do whatever they want so we can come home. The video ended with a close-up of little Funmi's face, tears streaming down her cheeks as she whispered, "I want to go home to Mama." I had to set the phone down before I threw it against the wall in rage and despair. These monsters were using my children's voices to manipulate me, forcing me to choose between justice and motherhood. But as I stared at the blank screen, something Inspector Adeyemi had said earlier came back to me. These people have resources we can't match. She was wrong. They had one resource I could match. They had my children, but I had something they needed just as desperately. I had evidence that could destroy them, testimony that could send dozens of powerful people to prison, and recordings that could expose corruption throughout Nigeria's justice system. More importantly, I had something they'd underestimated. I was a mother fighting for her children's lives, which made me the most dangerous person in this entire scenario. I called Inspector Adeyemi back. "I want to make a deal. Mrs. Okoro, we can't negotiate with kidnappers. Any deal you make." "Not with them," I interrupted. "With you. With the EFCC. With international law enforcement. Everyone who wants to bring down this network." There was silence on the other end then. "What kind of deal?" "They want me to recount my testimony and hand over all evidence. Instead, I'm going to give them something better. I'm going to give them me. But first, I need guarantees. Ironclad, international guarantees about what happens to my children if this goes wrong." "Mrs. Okoro, what are you planning?" "I'm planning to end this war once and for all. But I need to know my children will be safe no matter what happens to me. Can you arrange for them to be taken somewhere completely outside Nigeria's jurisdiction? Somewhere these criminals can never reach them?" "Possibly, but..." "No buts, Inspector. Before I do anything else, my children disappear into international witness protection. New names, new lives, completely untraceable. Promise me that." After a long pause, she said, "I can make that happen. But Mrs. Okoro, what you're suggesting sounds like suicide." "Maybe," I admitted. "But it's the only way to ensure my children grow up free from their father's legacy. And Inspector, I want you to understand something. I'm not doing this just for my family anymore. I'm doing this for Blessing, who died because she knew too much. For the banker who was murdered for cooperating. For the 47 families who lost their savings to these criminals. Someone has to pay, and if it has to be me, then at least it will mean something. Mrs. Okoro, just promise me about my children. Promise me they'll be safe." "I promise." As I hung up, my phone immediately rang again. The same number from the hotel meeting. "Mrs. Okoro, I trust you've considered our conversation and the video we sent?" "I have," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "I'm ready to cooperate fully." "Excellent. There's a warehouse in Apapa where we conduct sensitive business discussions. You'll come alone, tonight at midnight, with all evidence and materials related to your husband's case. Our technical team will verify that no copies exist, and then you'll record a comprehensive recantation of all your previous statements." "And then my children go free?" "Mrs. Okoro, your children will be released once we're satisfied that our business interests are completely protected. This may take some time to verify thoroughly." The lie was obvious, but I played along. "I understand. I'll be there at midnight. One more thing, Mrs. Okoro. Come alone. Any sign of police involvement, and your children will pay the price immediately." After he hung up, I sat in the silence of the hotel room, watching the sun set over Lagos through my window. In 6 hours, I would walk into a warehouse where I would almost certainly die. But first, I was going to record a message that would ensure these criminals faced justice even if I wasn't alive to see it. My phone buzzed with one final message from Inspector Adeyemi. "Your children are safe. The international transfer has been completed. Whatever you're planning, they're now completely beyond these criminals' reach." For the first time in days, I smiled. My babies were safe, which meant I was free to do whatever was necessary to ensure justice was served. The war was about to end, one way or another. The final chapter will blow your mind. Don't miss the stunning conclusion. Like and subscribe now. At 11:45 p.m., I stood outside a nondescript warehouse in Apapa, Lagos's industrial heartland, holding a briefcase that contained 15 years of my life. Bank statements, business records, photographs, and documents that told the story of my marriage to a criminal and my accidental discovery of a billion-naira conspiracy. The area was deserted at this hour, nothing but shipping containers and industrial buildings stretching toward the distant lights of Lagos Island. The air smelled of diesel fuel and salt water from the nearby ports, and the only sounds were the distant hum of generators and the occasional truck rumbling past on the main road. I wasn't alone, though the criminals inside the warehouse believed I was. Inspector Adeyemi and her team were positioned throughout the industrial complex, waiting for my signal. More importantly, everything I was about to say and do was being broadcast live to EFCC headquarters, international law enforcement agencies, and a secure server that would preserve the evidence regardless of what happened to me. My children were safe. That knowledge gave me strength as I walked toward the warehouse entrance, where two armed men waited to escort me inside. The interior was exactly what I'd expected. A vast, empty space with concrete floors and exposed steel beams, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that created deep shadows in every corner. But what I hadn't expected was the gathering of people waiting for me. Chidi stood near the center of the space, looking older and more haggard than I'd ever seen him. Around him were at least a dozen people, men and women in expensive clothing who represented the leadership of the criminal network I'd accidentally exposed. I recognized some faces from Lagos society pages, respected businesspeople and community leaders whose public reputations masked their true activities. The man from the hotel meeting stepped forward, no longer bothering with polite pretenses. "Mrs. Okoro, welcome to the end of your investigation. I trust you brought everything we discussed." I held up the briefcase. "Everything is here. Bank records, correspondence, photographs, digital files, 15 years of documentation about my husband's activities." "Excellent. And the recording devices you wore to our meeting?" I reached into my purse and pulled out the sophisticated recording equipment Inspector Adeyemi had given me, placing it on a nearby table. "Here. Though I assume you're going to search me anyway." He smiled coldly. "Naturally. But first, let's discuss the scope of your cooperation. You understand that your testimony could implicate dozens of legitimate business leaders in fraudulent activities they knew nothing about. Surely you see the injustice in that." I looked around the warehouse at the legitimate business leaders he was referring to. Their faces showed no remorse, no concern for the victims of their crimes, only irritation that their operations had been exposed. "I see people who built fortunes on other people's suffering," I replied. "I see criminals who murdered witnesses to protect their secrets." "You see successful individuals who provide employment and economic development in Nigeria," he corrected. "People whose prosecution would damage hundreds of families and businesses throughout Lagos." It was the same justification I'd heard before, that their crimes were somehow beneficial to society, that their victims were acceptable casualties of economic progress. But then Chidi spoke for the first time since I'd arrived. "Adunni, just give them what they want. Our children need at least one parent who's alive to raise them." The manipulation was perfect. My husband, who had betrayed our marriage and stolen from our accounts, now presenting himself as the concerned father worried about our children's welfare. "Our children are safe, Chidi," I said quietly. "Safer than they've ever been since you brought criminals into their lives." "Safe where?" The question came from a woman I didn't recognize, elegantly dressed with the kind of cold intelligence that suggested she was high in the network's hierarchy. "Mrs. Okoro, surely you don't believe we can't find them wherever they've been taken?" I smiled, and for the first time since entering the warehouse, I felt completely calm. "Actually, I do believe that. Because 6 hours ago, they were placed in international witness protection with completely new identities. They're beyond your reach now, which means I'm free to tell you all exactly what I think of your criminal enterprise." The temperature in the warehouse seemed to drop as the implications of my words sank in. I'd removed their primary leverage over me, which meant their carefully planned manipulation had just collapsed. "Mrs. Okoro," the hotel man's voice carried a warning, "you seem to have misunderstood your situation. You're surrounded by people who don't appreciate deception." "No," I replied, setting my briefcase down and opening it to reveal not documents, but surveillance equipment that had been broadcasting everything since I'd entered the warehouse. "You misunderstood your situation. You're surrounded by federal agents. Your entire conversation has been recorded and transmitted to law enforcement agencies in 3 countries. And in about 30 seconds, you're all going to be under arrest for conspiracy, murder, money laundering, and about a dozen other charges." The elegant woman pulled out a gun, but before she could aim it, the warehouse exploded with activity. EFCC agents and armed police poured through every entrance, their voices shouting commands as the criminals who had seemed so powerful moments before found themselves face down on concrete floors. Chidi looked at me with something that might have been respect mixed with terror. "Adunni, what have you done?" "What you should have done 15 years ago," I replied as officers placed him in handcuffs. "I chose my family over money, justice over comfort, and truth over lies." The hotel man was the last to be arrested, and as they led him past me, he paused long enough to say, "This won't end here, Mrs. Okoro. There are others. There are always others." "Then I guess I'll have to expose them too," I replied. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom in Lagos as a judge sentenced the last members of the network to prison terms ranging from 25 years to life. The trial had been front-page news across Nigeria, exposing corruption that reached into government offices, banks, and even law enforcement agencies. Chidi received 15 years for his role in the conspiracy, though his cooperation with prosecutors had earned him a reduced sentence. He would be an old man when he was released, if he survived prison at all. My business was destroyed, my social standing ruined, and my name forever associated with Nigeria's biggest financial scandal in decades. But I'd achieved something more valuable than respectability. My children were alive and safe, and 47 families had seen justice served for the crimes committed against them. The insurance settlement from our destroyed boutique, combined with the reward money from international law enforcement agencies, had given me enough to start over somewhere new. My children were thriving in their new lives, protected by identities that no criminal network could penetrate. As for me, I discovered something unexpected in the aftermath of my revenge. I had a talent for investigation, for uncovering the truth that powerful people preferred to keep hidden. The FBI had offered me a position as a consultant on international financial crimes, and several law firms wanted to hire me to help expose corporate fraud. My marriage to Chidi was over, ended not just by his infidelity but by the revelation of who he'd really been all along. But I was no longer the naive woman who'd trusted her husband's explanations for financial discrepancies. I was someone who'd faced down killers to protect her children and won. The revenge I'd planned had been simple: expose a cheating husband and make him pay for his betrayal. The revenge I'd achieved was something far more significant. I dismantled a criminal empire, saved dozens of victims from further harm, and proven that even the most powerful criminals could be brought to justice by someone brave enough to fight back. Standing outside that courthouse on the day of the final sentencing, I received a call from Kemi. My eldest daughter was now 17, living under a new name in a safe country, but still my baby girl. "Mama," she said, her voice strong and proud, "we saw the news about the trial. You did it. You really did it." "We did it," I corrected her. "You and your brother and sister gave me the strength to fight when I wanted to give up. You saved me as much as I saved you. Are you ever going to be able to visit us?" "Soon," I promised. "Very soon. And when I do, I'll have stories to tell you about what your mother learned about courage, about justice, and about the difference between revenge and fighting for what's right." As I ended the call and walked through the streets of Lagos, my city, despite everything that had happened here, I realized that my story wasn't really about domestic betrayal or infidelity or even revenge. It was about a woman who discovered that sometimes, when life hits you hard in the face, the best response isn't to hit back harder. Sometimes, the best response is to stand up, gather your evidence, protect your children, and systematically dismantle everything that threatened your family's future. My husband had hit me hard in the face because of his mistress. But I had hit back with something he never expected. The truth. And in the end, the truth had been more powerful than all their money, all their connections, and all their threats. Justice served cold is still justice served. Thank you for following Adunni's incredible journey of courage and justice. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who need to hear that no one is powerless against those who abuse their trust. Comment below. What would you have done in Adunni's situation? Your engagement helps stories like this reach women who need to know they're stronger than they think. Don't forget to hit that notification bell for more powerful stories of resilience and justice. Until next time, remember, the truth always finds a way to win.